Greetings. Today is the 121st day of the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine. I'm Natalia Staroprava, and we continue a series of briefings at the Media Center Ukraine. With us, we have Lesia Vasylenko, member of Ukrainian Parliament, a Ukrainian delegate to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Greetings. Let's start with the good news, the decision to approve the candidacy for Ukraine. How was it received at the Parliamentary Assembly? Indeed, a historic event happened yesterday, which will lay the cornerstone for the relations between Ukraine and Europe, as Ukraine has been given candidacy for accession into the EU at the Council of Europe, at the Parliamentary Assembly. The day before, we have seen the huge support for the move. Other 44 countries of the Council of Europe rallied for support for Ukraine. And here in the Council of Europe, we've been welcomed with the decision Ukraine made a week before with the ratification of Istanbul Convention in particular. Was this session any different from other sessions? Honestly, this year, the year 22, is marked by the fact that all sessions of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe have been dedicated to Ukraine. Wherever the session convenes, we hear the firm condemnation of the Russian aggression. The debates center around the aftermath of the Russian aggression inflicted in Ukraine. This week, we discussed topics like reinforced support of the internally displaced people and refugees, special protection for the unaccompanied and separated migrant and refugee children, the security and justice for women in peace negotiations. We discussed the food threat because of the blockage of the Black Sea and Azov Sea ports. We discussed the need to bring accountability for the perpetrators of atrocities and also bringing justice for the MH17 downed 17 years ago. The rapporteurs came to the conclusion without any doubt that this crime was committed by the irregular servicemen of the Russian Federation. Tell us about the decisions made regarding Ukraine. All those debates resulted in the relevant resolutions whereby the members of the countries of Europe testified their support of Ukraine and dedication to assisting Ukraine to help overcome both the aftermath of the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine and also to further undermine Russia and strengthen Ukraine so that Ukraine could prevail. We have a question. You're welcome. Vasyl Samopalo, Media Center Ukraine. It's no secret that Russia used to have a powerful lobby in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe that lobbied its interests. And then the lobby subsided. But now we hear the Russian propaganda trying to raise a voice again. And these might be countries like Bulgaria, Serbia, perhaps. So is the voice of the Russian propaganda or lobbies heard in the Parliamentary Assembly? This voice is noticeable. Uh, not during the public debates. There might be some discussion about the purported good Russians off stage, and this is something we will need to counter, perhaps with greater vigor, as we build our multilateral relations with other countries through the platforms such as Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and all the other international forums. As you're right, the degree of attention is abating. In the first weeks of Russian aggression into Ukraine, the world media would publish 500,000 reports covering situation in Ukraine. But now we've fallen below 70,000 publications a day, and this number is bound to fall further. And instead, the focus is shifted to let's develop the civil society in Russia, let's not equal Russians, let's protect the good Russians. These Russian narratives will still appear in the international media space. We know you've discussed the humanitarian consequences of the Russian aggression into Ukraine. Have any solutions been developed? These were ad hoc debates dedicated to lifting the blockade of the Black Sea ports. These debates were very case specific, and the subject of the discussion was that Russia has triggered a food crisis on the Asian continent and Africa, and also Russia is the very cause of the food crisis in Europe itself. Now, UK is experiencing a dire shortage of sunflower oil, whilst in Italy, the dairy products have gone up in price. As it transpires that the fodder has been procured for the livestock in Ukraine. If we take Germany, we have prices going up on beer, as Germany used to export the inputs for beer making from Ukraine. So now, how can we overcome the food crisis? The only way to do so is to organize humanitarian corridors, or let's call them food corridors, through the Black Sea and the Azov Sea. And that can only be done through the UN resolution and bring in a peacekeeping contingent into the Black Sea region. Will there be a political will to implement this solution? That's not for me to decide, and it's not a concern for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. It's definitely a matter that should be raised by the United Nations organizations, and we can say for certain that the Security Council of the United Nations will not make the decision, as it has to go through the General Assembly of the United Nations, and that is a massive undertaking that has to happen first at the bilateral level. What is feasible in the shorter term perspective is to ramp up the intensity and quality of the weaponry supplied by the Western partners to Ukraine, so that Ukraine could on its own protect the world food storage facilities and assure their export to the countries of Western Europe and further to the countries of the African and Asian region, the Near East, where people depend on them. Over 80% of the people depend on these food deliveries. I have a question. I agree with you entirely that the interest in the developments in Ukraine is waning. This is the 24th of June, and this is the fourth month of war, and this is not officially broadcast or communicated internationally. And we need to keep the focus of the world attention on us. So tell us about the key points on the agenda of the Ukrainian delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly in the nearest few months. Indeed, the Ukrainian delegation, in all its interventions, reports, committee contributions, keeps raising the Ukrainian question. We are not only contributing to the agendas of the committees of the Parliamentary Assembly, which are then discussed before the General Assembly, but we're also working bilaterally with the countries so that we could rally support for Ukraine, both to support Ukraine security-wise, to impose further sanctions on Russia, give financial support to Ukraine, but also to bring in the International Tribunal to investigate the crime of aggression instigated by Russia against Ukraine. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, incidentally, was the first international organization to recommend the member countries to set up this judiciary institution, this tribunal, and the effort is ongoing. The members of the Ukrainian delegation are reaching out continuously to help create the tribunal, as this is for the member states to reach agreement, to make arrangements as to the operation of the tribunal, the composition of the tribunal, and the venue where it would sit. What are your personal expectations of this session? The session that is coming to completion currently. Well, we have the results already, and that is the adoption of 3 resolutions with a number of recommendations for the member states of the Council of Europe for supporting Ukrainians who had to flee their homeland because of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation to other countries. This resolution covers the need to help Ukrainians find shelter, giving support to the Ukrainian children so that they could have access to education, but also stay in touch with Ukraine and being able to be educated in the Ukrainian language, support for the Ukrainian cultural centers abroad. And the same resolutions give recommendation to the countries of Europe that haven't yet lifted the visa limitations for Ukrainians to do so, so that Ukrainians could find refuge in these countries, and those willing to help Ukrainians could do so. Particularly, this would expedite the delivery of humanitarian relief and would cut up the red tape. Thank you. This was Lesia Vasylenko, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, a member of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And at 15 hours, we'll have a briefing about the threats to the environment